Okay, it's Mr. O'Brien with a haircut. I'm going to do a screen share. Here we go. Here we go. You probably remember that I refer to the comforters as miserable comforters of Job. It's from this, Job 16:2. I've heard many such things. Miserable comforters are ye all. Miserable comforters. Okay, let's take a look at verses 19 through 21. Also now behold, my witness is in heaven, and my record is on high. My friends scorn me, but mine eye poureth out tears unto God. Oh, that one might plead for a man with God, as a man pleadeth for his neighbor. Once again, this is Job begging for the chance to present his case before God, appealing to the kind of compassion that God would have if God were man. If God were man and knew Job's suffering, you could plead with him as you plead for your neighbor, for he would have the compassion of a creature and not just his divine, distant justice. I'm just going to see what else I'm looking. Oh, are there not mockers with me, he says, and doth not mine eye continue in their provocation? Well, I think this is quite accurate. His friends are mockers. And then he really drives it home. For thou, God, hast hid their heart from understanding. Therefore shalt thou not exalt them. His comforters, whether they mean well or not, God has hidden their hearts from understanding. In Job's suffering, he has more understanding than they do. Their hearts are veiled in their self-satisfied smugness, in their conventional put-downs, their pat and easy answers to what Job is going through. In the way that God hardens the heart of Pharaoh, and we'll talk about that when we get to Exodus. So he has hidden the hearts of the miserable comforters from understanding. And Job in his agony is piercing through and seeing something beyond the veil. The veil of the temple is torn in two at the resurrection of Christ. In a sense, Job, suffering in this extreme and intense way, unjustly, is seeing through the torn temple, the torn veil that covers the hearts of most ordinary men and prevents them from seeing through to this deeper understanding. But it's an understanding that unbalances you. Job is no longer bourgeois, you might say. He doesn't have this conventional attitude toward God that his friends do. A very understandable conventional attitude. They're shocked at what they think are Job's blasphemies. But we can see, if we're sensitive to what Job is going through, that he's given a kind of depth of perception, a kind of understanding that his miserable, comforting friends lack. A lot to say about James, who also talks about Abraham. I think what we might do when we finish the Joseph story is go back in Genesis and pick up Abraham, because you can't really understand this theological argument. You'll notice that the readings I gave you, St. Paul talks about Abraham in Romans and again in Galatians, and then James talks about Abraham, seems to contradict Paul, but not really. And then even Jesus is talking about Abraham in the dialogue, in the dialogue from John. We can maybe talk about that more when we meet in person. There's a lot there, and we might not really be able to unpack all of this from Paul, Jesus, and James until we really have a better sense of the context of the full story of Abraham as told earlier in Genesis before we get to the story of Joseph and his brothers. But let me share one more thing. And that would be, and I can get to it. See, the problem is, I got to wait for that thing to go up, and then I get to this. Okay, here we go. Maybe. Wake up, computer. Jesus says, now a slave has no permanent place in the family, but a son belongs to it forever. And this comes right after Jesus replied, truly, truly, I tell you, everyone who sins is a slave to sin. A slave is not a permanent member of the family, but a son belongs to it forever. Do you remember what Paul said? And I have to go right back to sharing. Do you remember what Paul said at the end of Galatians? If you belong to Christ, then you are Abraham's seed and heirs according to the promise. This comes right after he talks about how when we were under the law as Jews, we were held in custody under the law, locked up until the faith that was to come would be revealed. Now that this faith has come, we are no longer under a guardian. So in Christ Jesus, you are all children of God through faith. So in other words, we become sons in the household and heirs, sons and heirs, whereas before we were either under a guardianship to the law or we were simply slaves to sin. Either you're a slave in the household and you have no rights to possession, or you are a mere minor under the guardianship of a tutor, which is the law, or you escape from sin, you are freed from sin, you internalize the law, you are no longer seeking righteousness merely externally, and in fact, you are raised to a status of co-heirs with Christ by adoption into the family of the Father. You are grafted, you are a branch grafted onto the true vine. All of this fits together, but will really make more sense, I think, when we look at Abraham. But first, we're going to finish up the story of Joseph. Well, that's it for now. More later, and I'm waiting for your mother to knit me that phrase on a sweater there. Okay, Ryan? Bye.